The morning sun cast long shadows across the tarmac at Heathrow Airport as Diana Spencer adjusted the silk scarf around her neck one final time. The April breeze carried the scent of jet fuel and anticipation as photographers pressed against the barriers, their cameras clicking in rapid succession. She had learned to ignore the constant flash of bulbs, but today felt different. Today marked the beginning of what palace officials had carefully orchestrated as a crucial diplomatic mission to Italy, though Diana suspected it served a more personal purpose for the royal family. Charles stood beside her, his posture rigid as always when cameras were present. He wore his naval uniform with practiced precision, every button gleaming under the airport lights. Diana caught his eye briefly, searching for some hint of enthusiasm about their upcoming journey, but found only the familiar distant expression that had become his default demeanor during public appearances. The space between them felt vast despite standing mere inches apart. "Your Royal Highnesses, if you would please move toward the aircraft," whispered Sir Christopher Malaby, the British ambassador to Italy, who had flown back specifically to escort them. His diplomatic smile never wavered, though Diana noticed the slight tension around his eyes. This tour carried significant weight beyond the usual royal obligations. Relations between Britain and Italy had grown somewhat strained over recent trade disagreements, and the Foreign Office hoped a successful royal visit might smooth diplomatic waters. Diana's lady-in-waiting, Anne Beckwith Smith, approached with a final briefing folder. "Your Royal Highness, the schedule for Rome has been finalized. The Vatican meeting is confirmed for tomorrow afternoon, and the Italian president will host the state dinner Thursday evening." Diana nodded, though her mind wandered to the more personal aspects of this journey. She had specifically requested time to visit Italian orphanages and children's hospitals, causes that had become increasingly important to her despite initial resistance from palace officials. The flight to Rome aboard the royal aircraft passed in relative quiet. Charles buried himself in diplomatic briefings while Diana gazed out the window, watching the European countryside unfold below. She thought about how different this trip felt from their earlier tours. The honeymoon period of their marriage, if it had ever truly existed, seemed like a distant memory now. Yet something about traveling to Italy stirred an unexpected excitement within her. Perhaps it was the promise of experiencing a culture renowned for its warmth and passion, qualities that felt increasingly absent from her daily life in the cold corridors of British palaces. As they descended toward Rome's Fiumicino airport, Diana could see the Mediterranean coast stretching endlessly toward the horizon. The azure water sparkled under the afternoon sun, and she felt a sudden longing for simplicity, for the kind of uncomplicated joy she imagined Italian families shared around their dinner tables. The aircraft touched down smoothly, and, through her window, Diana could see crowds gathering behind security barriers, their faces bright with curiosity and welcome. The Italian reception committee waited in perfect formation on the tarmac. President Sandro Pertini, despite his advanced age, stood with remarkable dignity, his weathered face creased into a genuine smile. Beside him, Prime Minister Bettino Craxi adjusted his tie nervously, clearly understanding the importance of making an excellent first impression on the British royals. The Italian protocol officers had spent weeks planning every detail of this welcome ceremony, down to the precise angle at which the red carpet would be positioned. Diana stepped from the aircraft first, and the crowd's reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Cheers erupted from behind the barriers as people waved small British and Italian flags. She paused at the top of the aircraft steps, overwhelmed by the warmth of the reception. This was different from the polite applause she typically received in Britain. These people seemed genuinely excited to see her, and their enthusiasm was infectious. Charles followed, offering his characteristic wave to the crowd before joining Diana on the red carpet. President Pertini approached with open arms, a gesture of welcome that surprised even seasoned diplomatic observers. "Your Royal Highnesses," he said in accented English, "Italy welcomes you with open hearts." His sincerity was unmistakable, and Diana found herself responding with a genuine smile that hadn't graced her face during public appearances in months. The drive through Rome's ancient streets proved magical in ways Diana hadn't anticipated. Their motorcade moved slowly through neighborhoods where residents had gathered on balconies, throwing flower petals and calling out enthusiastic greetings. Children pressed their faces against shop windows, and elderly women crossed themselves as the royal cars passed. The spontaneous outpouring of affection felt authentic in a way that carefully choreographed British ceremonies never did. "They seem genuinely pleased to see us," Diana observed to Charles as they passed the Colosseum, its ancient stones glowing golden in the late afternoon light. Charles nodded absently, his attention focused on the briefing papers spread across his lap. "The Foreign Office will be pleased," he replied, missing entirely the personal joy Diana was experiencing in this moment. Their hotel, the Grand Hotel Plaza, had been transformed for their arrival. Italian security officials worked alongside British protection officers, creating an interesting cultural exchange among the typically serious law enforcement personnel. Diana noticed how the Italian officers seemed more relaxed, more willing to share a joke or offer assistance beyond their strict duties. Even their protection detail appeared to be absorbing some of the Italian warmth. The suite overlooking the Piazza della Repubblica had been decorated with fresh flowers from the Italian countryside. Roses, lilies, and jasmine filled the rooms with fragrance that reminded Diana of her grandmother's garden. She moved to the balcony, looking out over the bustling square where Romans continued their early evening activities, seemingly unfazed by the royal presence in their midst. The normalcy of their lives appealed to her in ways she couldn't quite articulate. Charles immediately began reviewing the next day's schedule with their private secretary, while Diana explored the suite's elegant rooms. Italian craftsmen had clearly lavished attention on every detail, from the hand-painted ceiling frescoes to the marble bathwork that spoke of centuries of artistic tradition. This level of beauty integrated into daily life fascinated her, so different from the austere grandeur of British royal residences. A knock at the door announced the arrival of their Italian liaison officer, Count Alessandro Cicogna, a charming nobleman whose family had served in diplomatic roles for generations. His manner combined formal protocol with an unmistakably Italian warmth that immediately put Diana at ease. "Your Royal Highness," he addressed Diana with a slight bow, "if I may suggest, the view from the roof terrace at sunset is quite spectacular. Perhaps after you've settled, you might enjoy seeing Rome from that perspective." Diana accepted the invitation eagerly, though Charles declined, citing preparation needs for tomorrow's meetings. As she followed Count Cicogna through the hotel's elegant corridors, Diana felt a sense of freedom she hadn't experienced in months. The palace's constant scrutiny seemed temporarily suspended, replaced by the genuine hospitality of people who appeared to care more about her comfort than her protocol adherence. The roof terrace revealed Rome in all its evening glory. Church bells chimed across the city as the sun painted the ancient buildings in shades of amber and rose. Count Cicogna proved to be an excellent guide, pointing out landmarks while sharing stories that brought the city's history to life. "That is the Pantheon," he explained, gesturing toward the massive domed structure, where Raphael rests. "The Romans still leave flowers there, you know. They believe art should be honored as we honor saints." Diana found this notion deeply moving. In Britain, reverence seemed reserved for tradition and duty, but here was a culture that celebrated beauty and creativity with religious devotion. "Do you think," she asked hesitantly, "that ordinary people can visit these places freely?" Count Cicogna looked surprised by the question. "But, of course, Your Highness. Art belongs to everyone. It is our gift from God to be shared." As darkness settled over Rome, the city transformed into something magical. Lights twinkled from ancient buildings, restaurants filled with families sharing leisurely dinners, and the sound of laughter drifted up from the streets below. Diana realized she was witnessing a kind of life she had never experienced, where beauty, family, and joy seemed to interweave naturally into the fabric of daily existence. Returning to the suite, she found Charles already retired to his separate bedroom, diplomatic papers scattered across his nightstand. Diana stood at her window, still wearing her travel clothes, reluctant to end this first day in Italy. Tomorrow would bring formal ceremonies, careful protocols, and the weight of royal expectations, but tonight she allowed herself to dream of what it might feel like to walk those lamplit streets as an ordinary woman, to share a simple meal with people who valued warmth over status. The soft knock of her lady-in-waiting reminded Diana of her evening routine, but, as she prepared for bed, her mind remained filled with images of the day. The genuine smiles of the Italian people, the beauty casually integrated into their daily lives, the sense that passion and joy were not luxuries to be rationed but essential elements of human existence. For the first time in months, Diana fell asleep with anticipation rather than dread for what tomorrow might bring. In the distance, the eternal city hummed with life, its ancient stones holding centuries of stories about love, loss, triumph, and renewal. Diana had arrived in Italy as a dutiful royal fulfilling diplomatic obligations, but something in the Roman air whispered of transformation possibilities she hadn't dared to imagine. The first day of their Italian journey had ended, but Diana sensed it was really the beginning of something much more profound than anyone had anticipated. Dawn in Rome arrived with the gentle tolling of church bells, a sound that seemed to emanate from every direction across the ancient city. Diana woke before her scheduled call, drawn to the balcony by the melody of awakening Rome. Below in the piazza, vendors were setting up flower stalls, their colorful displays creating a natural carpet of roses, carnations, and jasmine. The sight filled her with unexpected joy, this daily celebration of beauty that seemed so fundamental to Italian life. Charles was already dressed and reviewing his notes when Diana emerged from her room, having chosen a powder blue suit that she hoped would photograph well against Rome's golden architecture. Their first official engagement was a visit to the Quirinale Palace, followed by the much-anticipated audience with Pope John Paul II at the Vatican. Diana felt nervous about meeting the Pope, not from any religious anxiety, but because she knew this meeting would be scrutinized by millions around the world. The breakfast served in their suite featured Italian specialties that delighted Diana's senses. Fresh pastries filled with ricotta and candied fruits, coffee so rich it seemed like liquid velvet, and fruit that tasted as if it had been picked moments before. Even this simple meal felt like a celebration, so different from the efficient, business-like breakfasts she was accustomed to at Buckingham Palace. "The Italian press seems quite taken with you," observed Sir Christopher Malaby as he briefed them on the morning's coverage. He spread several newspapers across the table, and Diana was surprised to see her photograph prominently featured on every front page. The headlines, though in Italian, seemed warm and welcoming rather than the critical scrutiny she often faced from British tabloids. Count Sicagna arrived to escort them to their first appointment, and Diana noticed how his presence seemed to infuse even the formal proceedings with warmth. "Your Royal Highness," he said to Diana, "President Pertini has specifically requested that you see his private collection of photographs from his youth. He was quite taken with your interest in people yesterday and wishes to share some stories." The drive to the Quirinale Palace took them through Rome's historic center, past the Trevi Fountain where early morning tourists were already tossing coins and making wishes. Diana found herself wondering what she would wish for if she could stop and participate in such a simple ritual. Freedom, perhaps, or the chance to experience authentic human connection without the burden of royal protocol. President Pertini received them in his private office, a surprisingly cozy room filled with books, family photographs, and mementos from his long political career. Despite being in his late 80s, he possessed a vitality that impressed both royals. His eyes sparkled with intelligence and humor as he shared stories of his youth, his involvement in the resistance during World War II, and his unwavering belief in the dignity of ordinary people. "Your Royal Highness," he said to Diana, speaking in careful English, "I have heard of your work with children and those who suffer. This is the true nobility, not the titles we inherit, but the love we choose to give." His words touched Diana deeply, validating her instincts about what mattered most in her role. The president's photo collection proved fascinating, showing a young man who had risked everything for his beliefs about justice and human dignity. Diana found herself drawn into conversations about social responsibility and the power of public figures to make meaningful differences in people's lives. Charles participated politely but seemed more interested in discussing trade agreements and diplomatic protocols. From the Quirinale, their motorcade proceeded toward Vatican City, passing through streets lined with Romans who had taken time from their morning routines to wave and cheer. Diana was struck by how different this felt from typical British royal appearances. These people seemed genuinely happy to see them, not merely performing expected civic duty. The approach to St. Peter's Basilica overwhelmed Diana with its majesty. The massive dome dominated the Roman skyline, and the square designed by Bernini embraced visitors in its curved colonnades like welcoming arms. Swiss guards in their colorful uniforms stood at attention as their car passed through the gates into Vatican City, the world's smallest independent state. Monsignor Stanislav Dziwas, the Pope's private secretary, greeted them at the Apostolic Palace entrance. His gentle manner and genuine warmth immediately put Diana at ease. "His Holiness is very pleased to receive you," he said in accented English. "He has followed your charitable work with great interest and hopes to discuss your commitment to helping children." The walk through the Vatican's magnificent corridors felt like a journey through centuries of art and faith. Frescoes by Raphael and Michelangelo decorated walls and ceilings, while marble sculptures seemed to come alive in the soft light filtering through ancient windows. Diana had studied these masterpieces in books, but seeing them in person proved overwhelming. Every surface spoke of humanity's greatest artistic achievements, all dedicated to expressing divine love and beauty. The papal apartment was surprisingly modest, furnished simply with wooden furniture and religious artifacts that spoke of personal faith rather than institutional grandeur. Pope John Paul II, despite his recent recovery from the assassination attempt, radiated strength and compassion that filled the room with peaceful energy. "Welcome to Rome," "Your Royal Highnesses," the Pope said in English, his accent thick but his words clear. Diana was surprised by his warmth as he took her hands in greeting, a gesture that felt genuinely paternal. Charles bowed appropriately, but Diana sensed the Pope's particular interest in speaking with her. Their conversation ranged across topics that mattered deeply to Diana. The Pope spoke passionately about social justice, the protection of children, and the responsibility of those in privileged positions to serve those who suffered. Diana found herself discussing her work with homeless charities and her desire to bring more attention to AIDS patients, causes that sometimes put her at odds with traditional palace approaches. "You have a gift," the Pope told Diana, his eyes serious but kind. "God has given you a platform to touch hearts and change minds. Use this gift wisely, but do not let others diminish your compassion in the name of protocol." His words resonated deeply with Diana, who had often felt torn between her instincts to help people directly and the palace's preference for more distant charitable patronage. The private audience lasted longer than scheduled, with the Pope showing particular interest in Diana's plans to visit children's hospitals and orphanages during their Italian tour. He blessed several rosaries that Diana planned to give to young patients, and she was moved by his genuine concern for individual children he would never meet. Charles discussed British-Vatican relations and various diplomatic matters, but Diana sensed the Pope's attention remained focused on her charitable commitments. Before they departed, Pope John Paul II presented Diana with a special blessing for her work with children and encouraged her to continue following her heart in service to others. The return journey to their hotel took them past the Castel Sant'Angelo, where Diana glimpsed the Ponte degli Angeli with its Baroque angels seemingly dancing across the Tiber River. Everything in Rome appeared designed to lift the spirit, to remind people of beauty and transcendence in daily life. This integration of art, faith, and ordinary existence fascinated Diana, who had grown up in a culture that compartmentalized such things. Lunch at the hotel featured several Italian journalists who had been granted interviews with the royal couple. Diana was pleasantly surprised by their questions, which focused more on her charitable interests and personal impressions of Italy rather than the gossip and speculation she faced from British media. The journalists seemed genuinely interested in understanding her perspective and motivations. "What has impressed you most about Italy?" asked Giuliana Bertolini from Corriere della Sera. Diana thought carefully before answering. "The warmth of the people and how naturally beauty is woven into everyday life. In Rome, you cannot walk down any street without encountering something magnificent, and the people here seem to understand that beauty is essential nourishment for the human spirit." The afternoon was reserved for a private tour of the Capitoline museums, where Diana could indulge her growing appreciation for art without the pressure of official ceremonies. Professor Giuseppe Marchetti, the museum director, proved to be an enthusiastic guide who brought ancient sculptures and Renaissance paintings to life with his passionate descriptions. Standing before the Marcus Aurelius equestrian statue, Diana learned about the philosopher-emperor who wrote about duty, compassion, and the interconnectedness of all human beings. He believed, Professor Marchetti explained, that our highest calling is to serve others and to remember that we are all part of the same human family. Diana found these ancient ideas surprisingly relevant to her own struggles with royal duty and personal authenticity. The Pinacoteca Capitolina housed paintings that moved Diana to tears, particularly Caravaggio's St. John the Baptist, with its raw humanity and divine light. Caravaggio painted saints as ordinary people, the professor noted, because he believed the sacred lived within common humanity. This concept resonated powerfully with Diana's own approach to royal duties, her instinct to connect with people as human beings rather than subjects. Charles joined them for the final part of the museum tour, and Diana was pleased to see and genuinely engaged with the art and history. For a brief time, they felt like a normal couple exploring one of the world's great cultural treasures together. The professor presented them with a beautiful book of Roman art that Diana knew she would treasure long after their return to England. Evening brought another state dinner, this time hosted by Prime Minister Craxi at Villa Madama, a Renaissance palace that perfectly embodied Italian elegance. The villa's gardens overlooked Rome, and Diana spent time before dinner walking among the perfectly manicured hedges and ancient sculptures while the sun set over the eternal city. The dinner conversation flowed as smoothly as the exceptional wine, with Italian officials proving to be charming companions who discussed everything from art to family life with equal enthusiasm. Diana found herself seated next to Cardinal Agostino Casaroli, the Vatican Secretary of State, who shared fascinating stories about papal diplomacy and the Church's role in promoting peace and social justice around the world. "Your Holiness made quite an impression on His Holiness today," the Cardinal told Diana over the seafood course. He believes you have the gift of reaching people's hearts, which is perhaps the most important diplomatic skill of all. Diana blushed at the compliment but felt validated in her approach to royal duties. As the evening wound down with traditional Italian songs performed by a local choir, Diana reflected on how much had changed in just 2 days. Rome had awakened something within her, a recognition that duty and joy need not be mutually exclusive, that serving others could be a source of deep fulfillment rather than burden. Standing on the villa's terrace under the Roman stars, with the city's lights twinkling below like earthbound constellations, Diana felt a profound sense of possibility. Tomorrow would bring new experiences, new encounters with Italian warmth and creativity. For the first time in months, she looked forward to whatever lay ahead. The third morning in Rome dawned with unseasonable warmth, as if the city itself was embracing the royal visitors with Mediterranean sunshine. Diana had requested an early start for what she considered the most important day of their Italian tour, visits to local hospitals and children's facilities. The palace schedulers had initially resisted these engagements, preferring more traditional cultural events, but Diana had insisted with unusual firmness. Breakfast arrived with the morning newspapers, and Diana was delighted to see that Italian coverage of their visit remained overwhelmingly positive. Unlike the critical scrutiny she often faced from British tabloids, Italian journalists seemed genuinely enchanted by her warmth and accessibility. One headline in La Repubblica read La Principessa del Popolo, the people's princess, a phrase that would prove prophetic. Charles appeared distracted during breakfast, reviewing briefings for his separate schedule of economic meetings with Italian business leaders. Diana noticed the growing distance between their parallel tracks during this tour. While she gravitated toward human connections and charitable work, Charles remained focused on diplomatic protocols and trade discussions. The contrast in their approaches was becoming more apparent with each passing day. "Your Royal Highness," Count Sicagna announced as he arrived to escort Diana to her first appointment, "the children at Ospedale Bambino Gesù have been preparing for your visit all week. The hospital staff says they have never seen such excitement." Diana smiled, feeling that familiar flutter of nervous anticipation she experienced before meeting seriously ill children. These encounters always moved her deeply and reminded her why she had chosen to use her platform for charitable work. The drive to the children's hospital took them through Rome's Trastevere neighborhood, where morning life unfolded with characteristic Italian vibrancy. Mothers pushed strollers while chatting with neighbors, elderly men played cards at sidewalk cafes, and children walked to school with backpacks bouncing against their small shoulders. Diana envied this normalcy, this ability to move through life without constant scrutiny and protocol. Ospedale Bambino Gesù, known as the Pope's Hospital for its Vatican connections, proved to be a remarkable facility where cutting-edge medical care combined with genuine warmth. Dr. Giuseppe Massimi, the chief of pediatrics, greeted Diana with obvious pride in his institution. "Your Royal Highness, our children have been practicing their English greetings, though I must warn you, they are more excited about meeting a real princess than about proper pronunciation." Diana's first stop was the oncology ward, where children battling cancer had created artwork specifically for her visit. The walls displayed colorful drawings of castles, princesses, and rainbows, each signed with careful childish handwriting. 8-year-old Marco, despite being weakened by chemotherapy, had insisted on presenting Diana with a drawing of Buckingham Palace surrounded by Italian and British flags. "I made this for you, Princess," Marco said in halting English, his dark eyes bright with fever but sparkling with joy. Diana knelt to his level, accepting the drawing as if it were the most precious gift she had ever received. "Marco, this is beautiful. I will treasure it always." She spent several minutes discussing his artwork, asking about his favorite colors and whether he enjoyed drawing animals as well as buildings. The emotional impact of these encounters never diminished for Diana. Each child represented a universe of hopes, fears, and dreams, and she felt privileged to share even brief moments in their brave journeys. Unlike formal royal ceremonies where every gesture was choreographed, these interactions felt authentically meaningful. In the cardiac surgery unit, Diana met 6-year-old Francesca, who had been born with a severe heart defect. Despite multiple surgeries, Francesca maintained an infectious enthusiasm for life that reminded Diana of her own son's resilience. "Princess, will you come to my birthday party?" Francesca asked through her translator. "I am going to be 7 next month, and Mama is making a cake with real strawberries." Diana felt tears welling in her eyes at the child's simple invitation. "I would love to come to your party, Francesca, though I will be back in England by then. But I want you to have the most wonderful birthday celebration, with the biggest strawberry cake in all of Rome." She spent over an hour in the cardiac unit, far longer than her schedule allowed, but unable to leave when so many children wanted to share their stories. The hospital's chapel, a small interfaith space designed to serve families of all religions, provided a moment of quiet reflection. Diana lit a candle for each child she had met, saying private prayers for their healing and happiness. Dr. Massimi found her there, clearly moved by her genuine connection with his young patients. "Your Royal Highness," he said softly, "in 30 years of pediatric medicine, I have seen many important visitors. Politicians, celebrities, even other royalty. But you have something different. The children respond to you because they sense you truly see them as individuals, not as symbols of suffering to be pitied." Diana wiped away tears before responding. "These children have such courage, such joy despite their circumstances. They inspire me far more than I could ever inspire them. I only wish I could do more to help." Dr. Massimi assured her that her presence alone provided immeasurable comfort to families facing unthinkable challenges. The afternoon brought a visit to Casa Famiglia, an orphanage operated by Catholic nuns in Rome's San Lorenzo district. Unlike the clinical environment of the hospital, this facility felt warmly domestic, with children's laughter echoing through hallways decorated with their artwork and school projects. Sister Maria Consolata, the facility's director, welcomed Diana with the kind of embrace typically reserved for family members. "Your Highness," Sister Consolata said in careful English, "our children have been practicing a special song for you. They are very excited, perhaps too excited for their afternoon naps." Diana laughed, delighted by the idea of children too thrilled to sleep because of her visit. The orphanage housed 40 children ranging from infants to teenagers, each with unique stories of loss and resilience. Diana was particularly drawn to 4-year-old Alessandro, who had arrived at Casa Famiglia as a baby and considered the nuns his mothers and the other children his siblings. Despite never having known traditional family life, Alessandro radiated confidence and joy that spoke to the quality of care he received. "Alessandro speaks 3 languages already," Sister Consolata explained proudly. "Italian, English, and what we call Alessandro language, which involves many gestures and much laughter." Indeed, Alessandro seemed to communicate as much through expressive hand movements and animated facial expressions as through words, a uniquely Italian approach to conversation. Diana spent time in the facility's nursery, holding infants who had been abandoned at birth but were now surrounded by love and attention from the devoted nuns. The contrast with royal protocol struck her powerfully. Here, the most important people were the most vulnerable, and care was measured by tenderness rather than ceremony. During afternoon activities, Diana joined the children in their art room, helping to complete a large mural depicting scenes from Italian fairy tales. Her contribution was a princess figure that bore no resemblance to traditional royal portraits. This princess wore simple clothes and had her arms outstretched toward a group of children, clearly more interested in playing than in maintaining regal bearing. 10-year-old Sophia, one of the older children, confided to Diana about her dreams of becoming a teacher. "I want to help children learn to read," Sophia explained seriously, "because books can take you anywhere in the world, even when you cannot leave your neighborhood." Diana was struck by the child's mature wisdom and promised to send books from England to help build the orphanage's library. The visit to Casa Famiglia concluded with the promised concert, as 20 children performed Italian folk songs with more enthusiasm than precision. Diana found their imperfect but heartfelt performance far more moving than the polished entertainments typically arranged for royal events. When they invited her to join their final song, she participated without hesitation, adding her voice to their joyful chorus. Sister Consolata presented Diana with a small wooden cross carved by one of the teenage boys at the facility. "He wanted you to have something made with his own hands," she explained, "because he said you cared about them with your whole heart, not just your royal duty." Diana treasured the simple gift, knowing it represented authentic appreciation rather than obligatory recognition. The emotional intensity of the day had exhausted Diana, but also filled her with purpose and clarity about her role's potential for meaningful impact. As their car returned to the hotel through Rome's early evening traffic, Diana reflected on the profound differences between her morning with sick children and Charles's afternoon discussing trade policies with Italian industrialists. Both activities served important purposes, but Diana increasingly understood that her gifts lay in human connection rather than diplomatic negotiation. The children she had met today would remember her visit not because of her royal title, but because she had listened to their stories, admired their artwork, and treated them with genuine respect and affection. That evening's engagement was a classical concert at the Teatro dell'Opera di Roma, where Diana and Charles joined Italian cultural leaders for a performance of Puccini's Tosca. The opera's themes of love, sacrifice, and political intrigue seemed to mirror the complexities of royal life, though Diana found herself thinking more about the children she had met than the dramatic stage performance. During intermission, several Italian artists and intellectuals approached Diana to discuss her charitable work. Professor Elena Borghese, a renowned child psychologist, praised Diana's natural ability to connect with traumatized children. "Your Royal Highness, you have what we call cuore aperto, an open heart. Children sense this immediately, which is why they respond so positively to your presence." As the opera concluded with Tosca's tragic but defiant leap from the castle walls, Diana found herself thinking about courage and authenticity. The children she had met today possessed both qualities in abundance, facing their challenges with honesty and hope. Their example inspired her to consider how she might bring similar authenticity to her royal role. Returning to the hotel near midnight, Diana sat on her balcony overlooking the now quiet piazza. The day's encounters had reinforced her conviction that meaningful royal duty involved direct service to those who needed help most. Rome's ancient stone seemed to whisper encouragement, reminding her that the city had witnessed centuries of human courage and compassion. Tomorrow would bring their journey to Florence, but tonight Diana reflected on how profoundly Italy was changing her perspective on royal responsibility. The children's faces remained vivid in her memory, their courage and joy serving as both inspiration and challenge to live more authentically herself. The final morning in Italy arrived with bittersweet anticipation as Diana prepared for their journey to Florence, followed by their return to London that evening. She had awakened before dawn, reluctant to leave Rome but excited about experiencing another Italian city renowned for its artistic treasures. The past 3 days had transformed something fundamental within her, awakening possibilities she hadn't dared to imagine before arriving in Italy. Florence welcomed them with Renaissance splendor as their train pulled into Santa Maria Novella station under brilliant Tuscan sunshine. The city seemed smaller and more intimate than Rome, its medieval streets and Renaissance palaces creating an atmosphere of concentrated beauty that took Diana's breath away. Even the short drive from the station to their hotel revealed architectural marvels at every turn. The Hotel Villa San Martino, a converted Renaissance villa overlooking the Arno River, provided their base for this final Italian adventure. From her suite's windows, Diana could see the Ponte Vecchio spanning the river like a jeweled bridge, its ancient shops glinting in the morning light. The view reminded her of fairy tale illustrations from her childhood, except this magical scene was absolutely real. Charles seemed more relaxed in Florence, perhaps because their schedule included extensive time at the Uffizi Gallery, where his love of art and history could be fully indulged. Diana noticed this change in his demeanor and felt hopeful that they might share some genuinely enjoyable experiences during their final hours in Italy. Their first engagement was a private tour of the Uffizi conducted by Professor Antonio Paolucci, one of Italy's most respected art historians. The gallery's treasures had been carefully prepared for their visit, with certain masterpieces specially lit and positioned for optimal viewing. Diana felt overwhelmed by the prospect of seeing original works by Leonardo, Michelangelo, and Botticelli after a lifetime of knowing them only through reproductions. Standing before Botticelli's Birth of Venus, Diana experienced an almost spiritual moment of recognition. The goddess emerging from the sea seemed to embody a kind of feminine power that was both gentle and transformative, beauty that could change hearts and minds through its very existence. Botticelli painted an ideal, Professor Paolucci explained, but also a truth about the divine feminine that speaks across centuries. Diana found herself deeply moved by this concept of beauty as a force for positive change in the world. Throughout her life, she had been told that her appearance was her primary asset, but Botticelli's Venus suggested something more profound, that true beauty came from inner grace and could inspire others toward their highest aspirations. Charles joined them for the Michelangelo rooms, where the artist's unfinished sculptures seemed to struggle toward life from within their marble prisons. Michelangelo believed, the professor noted, that sculptures already existed within the stone, waiting for the artist to reveal them. His job was not to create, but to liberate what was already there. Diana understood this metaphor on a deeply personal level, sensing that her true self was also waiting to be liberated from the constraints of royal protocol. Their lunch took place at a private villa outside Florence, hosted by the Marchesi di Frescobaldi, whose family had been making wine in Tuscany for over 7 centuries. The informal atmosphere, with conversations flowing as freely as the excellent Chianti, provided a perfect contrast to the formal state dinners of previous days. Diana found herself seated next to Contessa Lucrezia Frescobaldi, a woman whose warmth and intelligence immediately put her at ease. The Contessa had devoted her life to preserving Tuscan cultural traditions while also supporting modern charitable causes, particularly education for disadvantaged children. Your Royal Highness, the Contessa said over the estate's signature wine, I have followed your charitable work with great interest. You have discovered something that many people in privileged positions never learn, that serving others enriches our own lives immeasurably. Diana appreciated this perspective, which validated her growing conviction that meaningful royal duty involved direct engagement with human needs. The conversation turned to the challenges of balancing public responsibilities with personal authenticity, a topic that resonated powerfully with Diana's current struggles. The Contessa shared her own experiences of finding purpose within traditional aristocratic roles, offering insights that Diana had never heard from British nobility. The secret, the Contessa confided, is to remember that titles and traditions are tools, not prisons. Use them to serve your highest values, and they become sources of strength rather than burden. Diana stored these words away, sensing they would prove important in the difficult decisions that lay ahead. After lunch, they toured the Frescobaldi wine cellars, where centuries-old barrels held vintages that would mature long after their current stewards had passed away. Diana was struck by this long-term perspective, this commitment to creating something beautiful for future generations to enjoy. The contrast with the immediate pressures of royal life couldn't have been more stark. The afternoon brought their final cultural experience in Italy, a private viewing of Michelangelo's David at the Galleria dell'Accademia. Diana had seen countless photographs of the famous sculpture, but nothing had prepared her for its overwhelming presence. The 17-foot marble figure radiated power, determination, and vulnerability in ways that seemed almost impossible in stone. David represents the moment of decision, explained Dr. Cristina Acidini, the museum director. Michelangelo captured the instant before David faces Goliath, when courage must overcome fear. Diana studied the sculpture's face, recognizing something of her own internal struggles in that expression of resolve mixed with apprehension. Charles seemed equally moved by the masterpiece, and, for several minutes they stood together in contemplative silence. Diana felt a moment of connection with her husband, both of them temporarily united in awe before one of humanity's greatest artistic achievements. These shared moments of beauty had become increasingly rare in their marriage, making this experience particularly precious. Their final engagement in Florence was perhaps the most personally meaningful, a visit to the Innocenti Hospital, the Renaissance foundling hospital that had pioneered care for abandoned children. The building itself, designed by Brunelleschi with its elegant arches and terracotta medallions, seemed to embody the Florentine belief that even charitable institutions should be beautiful. Dr. Giuseppe Moranci, the hospital's current director, led them through facilities where 15th-century architectural elements had been seamlessly integrated with modern medical equipment. This institution has been caring for children for over 500 years, he explained proudly. The tradition of service continues, even as the methods evolve. Diana was particularly fascinated by the hospital's historical archive, which contained records of thousands of children who had found sanctuary within these walls over the centuries. Each entry represented a story of vulnerability and hope, of families making impossible choices and communities responding with compassion. In the modern pediatric ward, Diana met children whose stories echoed those she had encountered in Rome, yet each remained utterly unique. 7-year-old Julia, recovering from heart surgery, had written a poem in English specifically for Diana's visit. With great seriousness, she recited her verses about princesses who helped sick children feel brave. The emotional impact of these encounters never diminished for Diana. Each child reinforced her growing understanding that royal privilege carried profound responsibilities to serve those who needed help most. The contrast with traditional royal duties, ribbon cuttings, formal receptions, ceremonial appearances, couldn't have been more dramatic. As afternoon faded toward evening, Diana and Charles prepared for their departure from Italy. The drive to Florence's airport took them past the Duomo, its magnificent dome dominating the city skyline as it had for centuries. Diana gazed back at Florence's terracotta rooftops and cypress-dotted hills, knowing this landscape would remain forever etched in her memory. The farewell ceremony at the airport included remarks by Florence's mayor and presentations of ceremonial gifts that Diana would treasure. A group of local school children performed traditional Tuscan songs, their young voices echoing across the tarmac as boarding began for their return flight to London. During the flight home, Diana found herself reviewing the photographs from their Italian tour, each image triggering vivid memories of encounters that had touched her deeply. The children's faces, the artistic masterpieces, the warm hospitality of their Italian hosts all combined to create an experience that felt transformational rather than merely diplomatic. Charles worked on his official trip report during the flight, documenting the diplomatic successes and trade agreements that had emerged from their meetings. Diana understood the importance of these accomplishments, but her own assessment of the tour's values centered on the human connection she had made and the insights about royal duty that had crystallized during their stay. As they approached Heathrow Airport, Diana felt the familiar weight of British royal protocol settling around her like an invisible cloak. The freedom she had experienced in Italy, the sense of authentic purpose in her charitable encounters, seemed to fade as English soil grew closer. Yet something fundamental had changed during their 4 days away, some recognition of possibilities that couldn't be completely suppressed. The British press awaited their arrival with the usual mixture of adulation and scrutiny, though initial coverage of the Italian tour proved generally positive. Diana's interactions with sick children had been particularly well received, reinforcing her growing reputation as a royal who genuinely cared about ordinary people's struggles. Returning to Kensington Palace that night, Diana unpacked mementos from their Italian adventure while reflecting on how profoundly the experience had affected her understanding of royal duty and personal authenticity. The wooden cross from the Roman orphanage, Julia's poem about brave princesses, photographs of children whose courage had inspired her, each item represented a reminder of what truly mattered in her privileged position. Italy had shown Diana a different way of living, where beauty, compassion, and authenticity could coexist naturally within daily life. The warmth of Italian hospitality, the integration of art into everyday experience, and the genuine care shown to society's most vulnerable members offered a model for royal service that differed dramatically from traditional British approaches. As she prepared for bed in her familiar surroundings, Diana understood that her Italian journey had ended, but its impact would continue influencing her choices for years to come. The children she had met, the artworks that had moved her, and the Italian example of living with passion and purpose would serve as touchstones for the difficult decisions that lay ahead. The 1985 Italian tour had officially achieved its diplomatic objectives, strengthening British-Italian relations and showcasing royal glamour on the international stage. But, for Diana personally, those 4 days in Rome and Florence had provided something far more valuable, a vision of what authentic royal service could become when guided by genuine compassion rather than mere protocol. That vision would prove both inspiring and dangerous in the years to follow, as Diana increasingly chose her heart over royal convention in her quest to serve others meaningfully.